Thank you all for joining us, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Galar Division Review Session. I am Caleb, the Seagull Gulley, and joining me with this video, as always, is Chris Moriarty Marks, the commissioner for the W&W Pokemon Draft League, and Hipsterbrownkid, that's Ali Sheikh over here, head coach Nashville Ninetales, and then our favorite, Jakob Jookeb Rich, the head coach of the Charlotte Charizards. Guys, this is kind of fun. We're at the halfway point in our season, 5 weeks in. Let's pull up the division standings of Galar just to see where we're sitting, and that way I can brag about this division. This is my division, as well as two of y'all are playing in my division. I want to reiterate that as the West Texas Wingles lead the division with 12 points at first overall on the table and in the division with a 5-0 record, 10-1 game score thanks to Ali, 3-0 in division, 19 differential there. The Charlotte Charizards right behind us with 6 points, third overall on the table with 3-2 match record, 7-5 game score, 1-2 in the division with +9 differential. The Nashville Ninetales in third with 4 points, sixth overall on our table, 2-3 match record, 5-8 game score, and a 2-1 divisional record, -4 differential. And then our newest member to our league, the Queen City Quagsires, with 3 points at seventh overall in our entire table, 2-3 match record, 5-7 game score, and 0-3 in division. Still looking for that first win. Guys, we're gonna dive into these teams. Kind of looking forward to it. I know Jookeb or Jacob, Rich, however we want to pronounce that for this video. You and Ali, I love that you get to talk about me first. And so, without further ado, guys, it's all on you.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a joy to just get to talk about Caleb and his top of the standings team. You know, that
Absolutely.
famous Kyogre that really just puts a lot of pressure on everyone in the league, honestly. And Ali, that's kind of the first talking point I wanted to start off on. This Kyogre has the highest win percentage of all the restricted Pokemon that we have in the leagues so far. I believe it was 88%, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
And it is pretty crazy. I mean, do you have any idea kind of why it seems to be, I mean, just the best of the best? Do you think it's just because it's in Caleb's hands or
I mean, I think that's definitely a major factor just because Caleb has all this experience and we've seen a lot of just consistent success in the regular season at least. But also the supporting members of the draft because you see two of those or the top answers for it, the Rillaboom and the Regieleki, also sitting alongside the Kyogre, so it's just harder to stop.
yeah, very true. And I mean, those were also, I believe the Kyogre, Alecki, and Rillaboom were all first 3 round picks, which is just ridiculous. So it's kind of crazy that he was able to just get those right off the bat. But, you know, it is what it is. It happens. And I mean, just to keep going with that, even kind of another crazy piece in there that you know, what you wouldn't think it would be kind of top of the standings in KD or anything is the Bronzong, another original draft pick, didn't get traded for anything, though he wanted to for a good bit. And that Bronzong has racked up an insane 15-1 KD across 3 series. It had 7 of 8 KOs in 2 of the 3 series that it has played. I mean, kind of just insane numbers all around. I mean, I know there's not really much to say about it, but that's just insane to think about. And
It's not really somewhere or it's not really a Pokemon that you'd see picking up KOs like that. Like you look at your tier ones, you'll see a Cinderace, you'll see a Dragapult, things like that. You expect high KO numbers off of that, but a Bronzong,
yeah,
that's something else.
exactly. Um, Another thing to go off of on this, Caleb's overall game score, that 10-1, the one coming from you of the Nashville Ninetales out of the 5 series played. I mean, kind of just, you know, really speaks to how well he's been able to pilot this team overall and just really prove his mettle throughout this regular season so far. And
Right.
Now, a major question that I had for you, Ollie, do you think that any free agency moves that Caleb could potentially make going farther into the season would only hurt his team, or do you think he could potentially make some really interesting moves to maybe help out his chances in the future? Because it seems like this team is pretty good so far.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely been a solid roster. It's the pieces really just meld with each other and cover for each other. I'm probably not the best at team building or just looking at a giant list of Pokemon and seeing, yeah, this is what this team needs. But I mean, it's really just whatever we think Caleb is gonna think of. If he
That's
pulls something like something predictable, or if he's just gonna go completely out the window and be like, this is a good piece for this team. This is what I need.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, it could also come down to a little bit of maybe what he needs for some comfort or something like that. If, maybe say the aromatisse or the mantine maybe isn't working out too well in his favor. But that is kind of still to be seen, I suppose.
Yeah.
And I suppose kind of one of the last points I maybe wanted to touch on here is with the current remaining schedule we have, his strength of schedule, you could say, do you think that there's anyone that can really easily put a stop to him? Or who do you think could be the biggest threat kind of moving forward with his remaining schedule? And
I wouldn't put any match as easy. Sorry, but
that's very fair.
any match against Caleb is not easy.
Yeah. That's very true. And just to reiterate the remaining schedule from here on out, for week 6, he will be playing JCJ. Week 7, it will be QCQ. Week 8, it will be TTR. Week 9, it would be myself, CCZ. And week 10, it will be going back to you of the Nashville Ninetales. And who knows? Maybe one of us two could potentially take another game or just the whole series off of him, completely ruin that 5-0 record he has so far.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's rosters are starting to fall into place. Everyone's getting a little bit more comfortable as we move into the second half of the season. So I mean, it's really anyone's game.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. It's really shaping up with all the roster moves or the free agency moves, excuse me, that have been coming out recently.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which that's another thing that we can kind of touch on here. He's recently picked up the Scrafty for I'm slipping my mind what it was. It was the Barrascuda, the Scrafty for the Barrascuda, which gives him that dark typing to help him out with some other things, kind of like the Calyrex or something like that. Kind of an interesting pickup, and also gets a couple interesting abilities to maybe help out in the future.
Yeah, that Pokemon is an absolute wild card.
For sure.
And I see where the original Barraskewda pick came from. It was just like it's a hard hitting swift swimmer or can't be redirected, something like that. But didn't really seem like the team needed that. And maybe a wild card that is Scrafty is what they need instead.
Yeah. And who knows, maybe it'll show up big soon.
Who knows?
All right. And another Pokemon that I kind of wanted to touch on, something that could be kind of seen as like a bit of a lesser threat, I suppose, is something like the Toxicroak. Really able to bring out some, fake out pressure for one, but then also being able to bring out some pretty interesting stuff like the poison jab, a stab poison jab for any fairy types that are in the league or anything like that. Really just a kind of an underrated hard hitting Pokemon, I would say. And, really intense pressure as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Pokemon gets it's a really interesting set of moves. Like it gets its poison jab, it gets the fake out. I believe we've seen feint on it, coaching,
Mm-hmm.
and it's been a good partner to the Kyogre, just sitting there healing up with the dry skin.
Yeah. Yeah. Brings not only damage, but just a little bit of support as well, like you had mentioned.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think we could talk all day about the Kyogre, Alecki, and Rillaboom kind of, I guess, trio or core that was the original draft pieces for this team. I mean, just insane Pokemon all in their own right, but able to put them together without having to worry about them being on one of your other pieces or one of the other teams to threaten your Kyogre. I mean, just honestly insane pairing between those three, and then you get to throw in stuff like the Arcanine on top of that, the Crobat to really just increase that speed in there as well. I mean, it's just such a well-rounded draft that hasn't had to move around many pieces at all so far. It's just really well done from Caleb.
Right, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But speaking of segues,
yeah, guess if we're done talking about West Texas, we can move on to your team, Jacob, Charlotte Charizards.
Yeah.
So, what I saw looking through your team and seeing all your matches, the front runner we see is that Xerneas. That Pokemon hurts. You let it get a Geomancy off, and you've suddenly lost all tempo in your match. And it's taken down things that resist it. It takes hits that should KO it. It's been a monster sitting there at 18 KOs. But, I mean, it's got a 50% win rate. It's won 6 out of the 12 games it's played. So, I mean, it's not the highest performer, but still very much needs to be respected.
Yeah, it honestly feels like the big thing that in prepping for this team you always have to respect. You know, you can swap out any of these upper tier Pokemon, the Landorus, the Cinderace, Dragapult, Mamoswine, and the same kind of arguments can be made for the lower tier Pokemon. But you know, if you do not have a plan to stop the Geomancy throughout the entire battle, then the second he gets it off, you are in for a nightmare of a game. And it's just, can you make good predictions at that point to try and protect things while you whittle it down? Because we all know that getting the special attack boost is a big issue, but the special defense, stopping any of these, you know, other special attackers, most of their lower tiered restricteds in the league preferring to go that way, just makes it such a hard thing to get rid of.
It's just, you really can't let it set up. Or if we go back to the match I played against Charlotte, was let it get set up, but then immediately just set the trick room and try to keep your tempo up as much as possible.
Yeah, very fair. Just trying to punish it for actually going for the setup.
Yeah,
one of the
exactly.
harder to execute strats with the way that teams are built in the league this season, but successfully pulled off by none other than Ali.
And man, another partner we've seen with this Xerneas is that Klefki, which again, a comfort pick for Charlotte, and it's had great success this season. It's won 5 out of the 6 games it's been in. You've got it there just setting up screens, protecting that Xerneas or any of the other big carries like the Cinderace, the Dragapult, the Landorus.
Yeah, I think as the seasons in this league have progressed, we've seen more and more that just having those priority screens off of Prankster can be such a huge deal, especially when you've got such a good defensive team, like what this team kind of isn't. But Klefki actually kind of helps make up for that barrier in bulk on this team. Right. And we've seen them not rely too heavily on this Clefable yet. Instead, preferring to go for, instead of redirection, just get these screens up, let the Xerneas take a hit, but then take control of the game after that Geomancy is off. Let things like Landorus come in and intimidate. Get this Dragapult, a surprisingly tanky Pokemon, behind screens, and stuff that should have been one-shotting it is now a 2-hit. And it just lets you play a bit looser with this hyper aggressive looking team.
Right. Um. Yeah. I mean, sitting on the topic of comfort picks, I think that's been one of the keys to success for Charlotte in this season. Seeing a lot of use out of that Cinderace and Thwackey that we've seen in multiple seasons past. Got 63% win rate on the Cinderace. Not as high, but a 43% on that Thwackey. But still just putting out that fake out pressure, the Eviolite bulk, and some interesting tech we've seen between the two, like that Grassy Seed Acrobatics, which was very interesting. But I think these two are like the backbone of the team.
Yeah, it feels a lot like throughout the seasons past, there have been some Pokemon that people just figure out how they want to use and are comfortable with using it, and they just kind of cling to those. And I think Thwackey and the franchise Pokemon Cinderace here are just a prime example of that. You know, he's just built up that degree of, okay, I kind of get what I need to do with these Pokemon sets, how I can actually use them in different ways, and that not only makes them feel more comfortable in that trainer's hands, but it also makes them feel much more threatening because you have to respect that they know what they're doing with that piece.
Absolutely. Just because it's not the strongest Pokemon doesn't mean just like having that comfort on him and that skill on him doesn't make him a much more threatening piece.
You could. But completely agree. I mean, we've seen him go so far as to Dynamax Thwackey in, I believe it was last season, and it takes comfort and knowledge with a Pokemon and understanding what it's capable of to have the courage to actually just hit Dynamax on a tier 3 or a tier 4. So definitely a piece that he likes.
Yeah, it's been fun to see. But a Pokemon that's been kind of interesting, if not a little bit weird to see, is seeing the use of this Landorus, the Therian form. It's always been a staple of the meta, whether it be singles or doubles. But I think in a format without Dynamax, the Therian form feels a little bit weaker just because you can't reliably hit your stab ground or your stab flying. Without the right partners. You don't have like those flying types, those levitates.
Yeah, and I think we even see some anti-synergies within the team with that, right? Like we've got the grassy terrain from Thwackey that weakens those earthquakes. We've got the Cinderace, who you really, unless it's hitting bounce to change to a flying type, you really don't want to be hitting earthquake next to such a fragile piece. And you know, it's just felt awkward and like it's kind of there for that intimidate, but it is a piece also that when he does set himself up to use it, you have to respect. And you know, as much as you know, there's these anti-synergies, there's also just don't bring Thwackey and run protect on your Pokemon and protect the turns you're earthquaking, and that's an incredibly viable strategy and something that people have to respect against it in team preparation. So it's felt a little awkward, but I think once he really wraps his head around it and understands what matchups he needs to bring it in, I think it'll be a fantastic piece.
Yeah, for sure. I think the biggest thing about it is that Intimidate, which is very prominent in Series 10 play. And I think being able to properly cycle the Intimidate is going to be huge to seeing success in this team.
Completely agree.
Yeah, I think the last thing I had to say here was just seeing major improvements from Charlotte ever since their inaugural season in season 5, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
But I think historically they had won 4 regular season matches in seasons past, but this season there's already 3 out of the 6 series that have been played. So huge improvement, and we're seeing him at the top of the table again. So shout out Jakob, you're doing great.
Yeah, definitely some solid improvements out of the Charlotte Charizards and their coach, getting better every season. But also just outside of even the stats improving, you can feel the settling in and the comfort coming through. You can really feel him kind of just wrapping his head more around the team building, what other players might be doing, stuff like that. So it's not only fun to see on the tables, but it's fun to actually watch play out in the games. And it means he's just going to keep getting scarier and scarier every season. But speaking of people that are scary every season, I believe that's our chance to transition to talking about your team, which means I'm kicking you out of here and I'm bringing Caleb in for this one because we got some analysis to do here. Caleb, welcome back.
Hey, what's up, Chris? I'm excited to talk Nashville Ninetales stuff with you here. We got a lot of stuff to unpack, man.
Yeah, the first and most important thing here is, as you can see, even the graphic still incorrectly says that Zygarde's the restricted on this team, but it's not. The image is correct, and it says Calyrex Ice has been brought in. We've seen somebody swap out their restricted.
Which is, I think, almost unheard of, in this season, because these teams, going back to draft day, I mean, I'll use my own team for an example. I went in going, I'm picking Rillaboom first, Regieleki second, now I'm going to get Kyogre third. These teams are built around that restricted that you get, so at this midpoint in the season, just flipping Zygarde out, saying, hey, that's not working for me, and go into Calyrex Ice, which we know is something he's very comfortable with. I think it takes a lot of guts, because it's not just the restricted you're swapping, it's all the other pieces feeding into this team.
Yep. And speaking of huge swaps, I mean, it's kind of hard to look at that top line and not notice that that is a Galarian Moltres, and we are not looking at the Toronto page. I am very sad. But the most recent addition, this Galarian Moltres, team apparently says we really, really, really don't want to have too many shortages of options against QCQ is what that tells me in that Shadow Calyrex matchup.
Yeah.
But
with Moltres and Umbreon there, that's definitely what you want going into a Calyrex Shadow matchup, because the other Calyrex is weak. Calyrex Ice is weaker to Calyrex Shadow. But something, we talk about the Zygarde with Comfy being problematic about, hey, it's going to slowly build its bulk up with coils. Comfy's going to get its health bar back. Well, Comfy can help set off this Moltres. We've seen it in seasons past. I know I've used it in Season 3. You've had Moltres ever since then, up to this point. And so this Comfy, while it looked like it had an identity crisis there for a moment, I think it could stay on this team and just be a fantastic piece to keep this Calyrex Ice up. And this Moltres, Drain and Kiss weakness policy. Like, we haven't seen much of the policy work, but I think it could definitely work with this team still.
Yeah, and still threatening that same thing with the Primarina, Giga Drain, Strat, just set off a policy. And now people have got to wonder if you're bringing all three. Is he doing it? Who's got it? Things like that. But one Pokemon that I really want to focus on in this team that has been, I don't want to call it the savior, but I also wrote down the savior. One Pokemon has put in so much work for this team, wins and losses, and that has been Araquanid, the surprise tier 2 of this season for me. This Pokemon has been defensively threatening, and I think more frightening, offensively threatening for this team. Your thoughts having had to play against it?
Araquanid's a nuisance. I mean, I used it in the Off-Season Cup, absolutely loved it. I think Ali did a great job in identifying this thing in the draft for giving it a wide guard, something to use there. But you think about this bulk because you have massive defense and special defense stats. The HP is a little bit lacking, but because of those base stats, you can throw it all into the HP, and you feel pretty good, honestly. But you can't count out a water bubble. Water bubble liquidation, water bubble scald. I mean, that's going to add up over the course of a match. And being able to set up defenses with iron defense stuff, we've seen other YouTubers do this in the past in their draft leagues. This Araquanid, it can be a wild card going in. It can be very, very variable sets, and I think that's what makes this a really good tier 2, and something that makes this team really thrive. Because spread damage is huge, and Wildcard says, hey, you're not going to get that.
Yeah. Especially on a team that threatens not only follow me but ally switch, super valuable to have just that wide guard, because something that people have to consider coming in against you is those spread moves and how they're going to hit these Pokemon, as well as the fact that you get to be a bug type and still take neutral from fire. Very nice.
Very, very nice.
But another...
And also shut down grass types.
So. Exactly. Looks at Rillaboom. But
exactly. Exactly that.
Looking across the tier 2 line over at this Umbreon, that has been a pretty stellar pickup for the team. Just in terms of adding that extra dimension of bulk to this team to make it really, really kind of its identity almost as a bulky team, and cause problems for a lot of these special attackers that we see either as the restricteds or as answers to restricteds on a lot of these teams.
I mean, it's this massive wall. You get Baby Doll Eyes on it, so something's losing an attack stat right off the bat. Turn 1's priority. There's not a lot you can do about it. You have Snarl, a Stab Snarl, that's going to whittle down your special attack stat. This thing can have regenning move of its own, but it fits the identity of this team. You touched on it. It's an extremely bulky team. It's not exceptionally fast, but it's not, really slow. It's on the slower end. Definitely a mid-speed tier, but this whole team thrives, and this Umbreon thrives in the same environment of you can do damage to us, and but we're gonna whittle you down, and we're gonna do more damage over time than what you can do in the 2 or 3 turns that your frail pieces are on the field. And I think that's what makes Nashville very hard to game plan against. And Umbreon is perfect in this tier 2 identity and shutting down your restricted and a very restricted dominant season.
Yeah, completely agree. And another upside to the Umbreon being that dark type, you're immune to Prankster, so none of these Pranksters can do anything about it. You can't be taunted by them, anything to stop stuff like that Baby Doll Eyes or Yawns or anything like that. But we've talked about the pieces on this team that are new and exciting and already thriving, but there is one piece on this team that has kind of fallen a bit on its face this season, and that is the face of the franchise, the Primarina. Sitting at a 33% win rate, not having the best season, just kind of struggling to really find its role defensively or offensively this season, it feels like.
Yeah, and, I think that's really odd. Primarina is one of those ones that has a lot of interesting coverage moves that it can have for a water type. How many water types get Energy Ball for one? But I think Primarina, it kind of struggles without the Dynamax, though. Dynamax was something that allowed this Pokemon to set up, get the weather in its favor, also be able to get whatever boosts from its partner Pokemon if it's to stay little. I think that's been kind of the major drawback to Primarina, and maybe some of its lack of success. I do think we're at the halfway point. Something's going to figure out. This team starting to look more and more cohesive, and I think that actually will allow this Primarina to thrive more so as we get closer to this playoffs.
Yeah, I think that was one of my big takeaways from it as well, was I didn't really see great partners or great ways to set up for the Primarina outside of the Comfey. But now that you've really rounded out the typings on your big major threats on this team, you've got this duo flying type, this ice type with, the psychic and, ground, dark. You're really starting to have to try to cover too much when you want to answer this team and all of the threats that it can have. And I think when Primarina is being used less as a comfort blanket on this team and more as a well-identified answer, I think we'll see its win rate improve. And I think we're at the point in this season where we're going to start to see Ali, who has so much experience doing this behind his back. We've seen him figure this out time after time and ramp up for that playoff buff. But speaking of ramping up for playoffs, this guy has the 5 air quotes worst restricteds left to play in his last 5 games. If we look at this on his actual page here, we've got the Memphis Machamps bringing the Zacian, kind of not arguably the most horrific restricted to face. Then he gets to go play Xerneas, back at Charlotte, which nobody wants to play that one. He even got
No.
to talk about why. Then you
Yeah,
get to go
yeah.
play Groudon, who's top 3 in win percentage this season, and he's kind of always been considered right outside that upper echelon of restricteds,
Yeah.
kind of ever since he came out. And then he gets to go play the Calyrex Shadow, which again we've talked about. He chose the losing matchup in the Calyrexes, but he's picked up some answers there. Um,
Right.
but as QCQ figures things out, that's just going to get to be even a harder matchup. And then he gets to end the season against the currently undefeated West Texas Wingles with that big Kyogre. Not an
Yeah.
exciting rest of the season to be looking forward to, but
Yeah. Yeah. They're top of they're the top restricteds, but I also think this team has a Calyrex Ice, which is a really good restricted in itself. It has the coverage to make this thing work. So if that Calyrex Ice gets its ability rolling, it's right up there with the rest of them. So I think it's just a matter of who gets their pieces in the right spot. And I have faith Nashville can make something work here.
I completely agree. I think they've made some good moves to shore up some matchups, um, and maybe even just grab a little more comfort to make going through the rest of this season work out. But yeah, that does it. I think for us
Yeah.
in the Nashville side of things.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh, we've covered a lot. Ollie, you get to hear our notes on that regard, but we do have one more team left in the as you can hear me turning my notes, in this Galar division, the Queen City Quagsires. They are the newest team in the W&W Pokemon Draft League. Jacob, as we get to talk about these guys, now that half the league's North Carolina, do you think that's a benefit to them? On the Eastern Coast, we got 4 in Carolina, we got 4 in Texas. Um, well, one thing I want to talk about here as we open this up, Jacob, is this has been a restricted heavy season, mainly because all the drafts have been focused around the restricteds that we've had. Um, but the most notable thing is this Calyrex Shadow and the 5 games that we see on our screen here. It has shown up in all 5 series,
Hmm.
has a 2-3 match record. Oh, you good, Chris? And a 5. No, you're good. You're good, man. I just and a 5-7. Your lungs sound like they're coming up. And a 5-7 game score. Um, this Calyrex has played in all 12 games that showed up. Is that a benefit to this team? Is that going to be a weakness going forward as we hit the second half? Because we've seen a little bit of variety in these move sets.
Yeah, I mean, we have seen a little bit of variety. I mean, it has mostly been that Astral Barrage or the Expanding Force coming through with usually a Protect as well as, an interchangeable fourth move. Um, I don't exactly know if it makes them more predictable per se, but you can almost always expect that the Calyrex will come, but it's still very hard of a piece to stop. I mean, how often can you just stop a Calyrex from blowing up at least one of your Pokemon, or at least taking them down 90% or so? It's
Oh,
it's a
absolutely.
really hard thing to stop for
Yeah,
sure.
base 150 speed. You also have access to Psychic Terrain with Indeedee, so priority moves are a nightmare to deal with.
Mhm.
Um, but that brings me to this synergy within this team. For a first draft, we're talking about the inaugural season here for the Queen City Quagsires, which I think they've done very well in coming into a draft league format
For sure.
and playing against a lot of people they've never played Pokemon against. But
Yeah.
one of the things you see here, we see Calyrex as the restricted, obviously. There's Tornadus here as a legend. We
Mhm.
also have Indeedee with the Psychic Terrain. And then in the newest promoted Tier 1, this Mienshao. This core of 4 Pokemon, I think has been really they've been played in almost every series, this core of 4, and it's the revolving pieces around them to an extent. Uh, what free agency moves you think here is the missing pieces, if you will? Because you got this 4, but Lycanroc, Sceptile, not knocking the team. Just I think if you make the right moves, this team's lethal.
Yeah, definitely it can be bumped up a little bit, I would say. I don't exactly know what they could potentially slot in, and also probably not the best idea to maybe start slinging out a bunch of ideas for him.
Oh yeah, no, true,
But
true. We don't want to make it that easy.
no, for sure. But I mean, I definitely think that there are a couple pieces that could come through, maybe in like a tier 3 or a tier 2 slot, to maybe start bumping up the damage, or even bring in a couple maybe supportive pieces to really start building the synergy around the team. Because like you said, the top 4 that they have now, I mean, the Calyrex hits hard, the Tornadus to set up Tailwind, the Indeedee to set up Psychic Terrain, and also bring some Follow Me. And then you could bring in a little bit more damage or just a little bit more supporting pieces, I think, in the lower tiers.
That makes sense to me. I mean,
Yeah,
it is a naturally fast team. Uh,
very.
and the thing about having a naturally fast team, you like to play that style.
Yeah,
And so you may agree to this is once this team has the momentum, they're really hard to stop. Like
yeah,
Calyrex gets going, Tornadus gets the tailwind, Icy Winds off. Toga tomorrow has the fake out pressure.
yeah.
I mean, I personally think it's very hard to get out in front of him and stop. Is there any kind of thought process as somebody playing in this division? You know how what do you do about that? You know,
Um, well, I mean, an immediate answer that could possibly think of would be something like Fake Out, but that Indeedee with the Psychic Terrain makes it impossible, basically. Um, that, and I mean, just you kind of just have to either go faster or just bulk it out and hit slower, hit second, basically, and just kind of hope that the Calyrex doesn't blow you up, really,
it's a really tough spot to be in. Honestly,
for
that's why
sure.
this team, for being a new team, they've been a nightmare to have to prep against. Even though you can see the Calyrex is probably is massive firepower, and you know it's probably coming.
Yeah,
Being able to plan for it and effectively live the damage is insane. But we've looked at the top
yeah,
side of this roster quite a bit. Let's look at tier three. And, for some reason, it's the case on Nashville Ninetales. It's the case here with the Queen City Quagsires. These water bug types, man, they've been so good.
yeah,
Galissapod has shown up as a pseudo carry, if you will, with 6 KOs, 3 faints in the series that it's played.
yeah.
I mean, what's your first impression there? Pun intended. On-
I mean, like you said, I wouldn't even say it's a pseudo carry. It really has been a secondary carry, like the Lycanroc to the Cali. Tying KOs with the Lycanroc at 6. I believe it is at 6-3 overall in terms of KOs and feints, whereas the Lycanroc is 6-1. It's been able to put out pretty relevant damage. He's been able to position it fairly well, whether he's using the emergency exit or whatever else he's trying to use for it. It's been able to do some really great damage. He's been able to position it. He's making it look fantastic for tier 3. That's for sure.
Absolutely. It's
Yeah,
been very good, and we've seen some adaptations to that emergency exit as well.
yeah,
It's we've seen some berries get thrown on there to keep that emergency exit from activating, so Galissapod stays on the field longer,
yeah,
which I think is a growth within the draft league. Looking at the matchup, saying, "Oh, I want this to be on the field. I don't want to be forced to switch here, so I want to make sure this thing's ability doesn't get activated."
yeah,
I think those are a lot of growth Queen City's done. I think Ham's done a really good job in building this roster. I mean, he's sitting at 2-3 right now. One of the things, you came in this season in season 5, or not season. You came in season 5
yes.
into this W&W Pokemon Draft League. As somebody coming in on their inaugural season, what's going through your mind coming into this with 7 other guys that have been playing this for multiple seasons at this point?
Well, I'll be honest. It's a really, really intimidating thing, especially when it's people you really don't know. I mean, he pretty much only knew John and maybe Parker as well. I'm not 100% sure on that. But I mean, he was able to immediately draft well. He's been playing fairly well in leagues better than I did when I first started, I have to say. I mean, he's been impressing me fairly heavily. And from what it sounds like from the NC boot camp, he's also been kind of the mastermind for a lot of their training sessions. So it seems like he's got a pretty good grasp on Pokemon just in general, and he's been able to show it fairly effectively so far.
I think he's done an excellent job in that regard.
Mhm.
Plus, I mean, he's the only man who has willingly draft Pukumuku. Shout out there. Uh,
True, true.
but he's made it work though. Like he did a swagger Lumberry Sceptile to get Unburden going. So he's thinking through his possibilities. But last point, I know we're coming close to time here,
Mhm.
is that with one more series win for the Queen City Quagsires, we're talking about that inaugural season. They pick up a third series win in the regular season. They will have the best opening inaugural season for any expansion team that we've had in our W&W Pokemon Draft League. So I think that is commendable on their part. I think they've done a
Yeah.
really good job. Very happy to have them in our league, and they've been a great addition.
Yeah, for sure. I
But
mean, huge props to them for sure, and can't wait to see what they do from here on.
absolutely. Well, that's going to cover our Queen City breakdown, if you will, Chris. I'm going to throw this back to you as we move on with this video a little bit further. I know you have some thoughts on this Galar versus Johto divisional table.
Yeah, so I think I'm actually just gonna kind of open this up for us to talk about, but to round this whole conversation out, we've taken a look at all the teams over here on the Galar side. If you want to catch the Johto side of this affair, go catch that video. I'm sure somebody that's doing YouTube stuff will put a thingy up for you. Click on that.
Yeah.
You guys couldn't see me wink, but I did it. Not very well. But anyways, so just to take a quick moment to talk about what this Galar division looks like up against Johto for the rest of this season and looking towards playoffs. What are some of the matchups that you guys are excited for? I guess is a great starting question. We'll go to you first, Caleb. Who do you think you want to see line up from the Galar side against somebody on Johto? Maybe even in a matchup that we have left to play this season.
Well, I have to look at the schedule to see what we have coming up. But
No, you're supposed to
matchups
pick
that
up
I've
the
liked.
low-hanging fruit of TTR West Texas Wings. Come on, I threw it to you on purpose.
Oh yeah. Well, we do get to play each other. I wasn't going to bring the spotlight to us. We finally get to play after 8 weeks into this. We'll get to see our teams pretty much where we want them when we play. That's obviously, I think, going to come down to who gets top seed going into the playoffs, and that's obviously top seed in playoffs usually comes with the bye. This time around, it does not. But winning division still gets you top two, which is really important. But I think the one seed obviously more valuable than two seed. But when all 8 teams are coming, you may not want to be where you are in the playoffs. But one of these matchups, as I pull up the schedule, I'll let somebody else fill this question if they're looking at it. But going into week 8, we get to see MMC and the Charlotte Charizards play again, and that was a fun playoff matchup last season. And I am kind of curious to see what these two do to bring it back. See who comes out on top, because both these guys at one point were pretty much even power level, and I kind of want to see how this Zacian Xerneas matchup plays up. Seeing a direct restricted counter and how they handle it.
Yep. I think that's entirely fair, and that segues me perfectly into asking, Charlotte, are you excited for that matchup, Jacob?
I am very much excited for that matchup, honestly. I'm really looking to see how he uses the Zacian and a couple of the other pieces that he has, like the Urshifu or the Thundurus or something like that. I think it'll be a really fun one. Haven't played him at all because it only won for cross division, and I'm really excited to see how it goes.
Yeah. Any other matchups that you're really looking forward to? Cross divisional, maybe for playoffs or any of the games that we've got left in this regular season.
Well, I'm always very excited to see the two titans of the draft league play. Caleb and you, Chris, of the Toronto Trick Roomers and West Texas Wingulls. And I'm also kind of interested to see the new and improved Nashville Ninetales going up against the Chapel Hill Hawluchas. I think that could also be a pretty fun one to watch.
Completely agree. Very much looking forward to that match myself. But Ali, another perfect segue to you, my guy. You excited for that matchup?
I should say yeah, I'm excited for it. It looks very, very tough. It was the same case last season that our matchup was just tough. But, I mean, he's got some experience now, or some draft league experience at the least. And I've got a brand new roster, so I'm looking forward to it. It'll be an interesting one.
Oh. Any of these cross-divisional opponents do you think you're most excited in maybe seeing in the playoffs?
Honestly, I'm ready to run it back. Run it back to week 1 where none of us knew how Series 10 Draft League was gonna be.
Yeah, no
And
kidding.
it was an absolute treat of a match to play.
That it was.
Yeah.
Let's
Yeah,
see what
you-
happens again. Nashville
TTR.
versus Toronto.
Yeah.
Toronto willing crits and get matches. I don't know how that works.
Yeah, manifesting game-ending crits.
It's
I've
bonkers.
been pretty good about just calling stuff this season. Let's be honest, it's been kind of scary. If only I could do it in my own games, that'd be great. But well, I guess I did on that
Yeah,
crit.
I know
But
you
yeah,
You got that
Your
crit.
powers
You
are
got that
growing every
meteor
week.
beam miss.
yeah. If only it
Yeah,
would
I
have
don't-
worked since then. I guess that's a great way to say it. I might have used it all week one instead
fair.
of saving it for playoffs. But
Fair enough. Hey, there is one matchup we haven't talked about though. And
Yeah?
all these cross divisional games happen in week 8, and I think we're all kind of curious to see how this plays out. We
Yep.
see Queen City, we see
Yep.
Jersey City,
Yeah.
and this man's never played Alex. I want to see how he handles that
Yup.
and what it does.
Wild card
I
of the
mean,
league,
there's
baby.
less chaos, but I mean, we got Hurricane with Pelipper and Scalds. I mean, that might be enough to do enough destruction. Very curious to see how the man handles the potential tilt that JCJ always brings.
Yep. You can never count a game against Alex as a free win. He's always got some weird idea up his sleeve that you just are not even a little bit ready for. And so, with that in mind, I agree. I'm incredibly excited to watch all of these cross-divisional matchups play out throughout the rest of the season and playoffs. But that one is sure to be enjoyable to watch, if nothing else.
For sure.
Just watching someone
At least
try
has
and
the
play.
potential.
Yeah, just, I mean, thus far we've seen QCQ kind of just plays this very calm, reserved, just generically correct play. And you can't do that against Jersey City because that's not how they're going to play at all. But very exciting.
Everything you learned is irrelevant.
Yep. You cannot predict what buttons he will push. He cannot predict what buttons he will push. You must just do and hope that works out in your favor.
No think, just vibes.
Absolutely.
Yep. But that is
And it
his
works,
motto.
man.
It does.
But with that, I think it's about time we wind this video down. We've been going for a hot minute on this Galar side of things, and we've got a Johto video to go do. So, for those of you at
Yeah, we
home,
do.
thanks for tuning in, and we will catch you guys in the next one. Before we go, I just want to give a shout out to our cast here today, with myself, Chris, Moriarty, Marks, Caleb the Seagull, Gulley, Ali, Hipsterbrownkid, Sheikh, and Jakob Jookeb Rich. And shouts out to him for helping me with the graphics this season. Been a big help. Love that. And special thanks to the boys at home repping the 4 other teams and all the work that they do to make this draft league happen. But with that,
Good lunch.
Have fruit.
And don't forget,
to dap the refs. We'll see you guys in the next one.
see ya.